My parents saw me as their ATM, made me care for their golden child, so I left. Years later, I'll surely see them begging me to save them. "We are going to say it once," my parents shouted during dinner. "Your sister will now stay with you. Whatever she needs, give it to her. No questions asked." I stayed calm and didn't reply. Found a new apartment and left. And when they realized I was gone, they called screaming, "Who's paying the bills?" I took a deep breath and said, looking back, I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there. The way my parents always favored Natalie, even when we were kids. How they'd make excuses for her behavior while holding me to impossible standards. While I was working part-time jobs through high school and college, building a career and becoming financially independent, Natalie was bouncing between half-finished degrees and finding herself. But I never expected them to cross this particular line. It all started on a Wednesday. I remember because Wednesdays were always my longest work days. I'd been at the office since 7 a.m., dealing with back-to-back client meetings, a server crash that nearly cost us a major account, and a boss who seemed determined to prove that no matter how hard I worked, it would never be enough. By the time 6 p.m. rolled around, I was running on fumes and the dregs of office coffee. The drive home was a blur of honking horns and brake lights. Traffic was worse than usual. Some accident on the highway forcing everyone to crawl along at a snail's pace. I called my mom, told her I'd be late, not to wait up. She sounded strange on the phone, distracted. I should have picked up on that too. "Oh, that's fine, honey," she said. "Your dad and I have some news anyway. We can talk when you get home." News. I assumed it was something minor. Maybe they were planning a trip or had seen some old family friend at the grocery store. Never would I have guessed what was waiting for me. When I finally pulled into the apartment complex, it was almost 8 p.m. The sky had darkened to a deep navy blue, and the streetlights cast eerie shadows across the parking lot. I noticed an unfamiliar car taking up my usual spot, a beat-up Civic with a dent in the passenger door, and a bumper sticker that read, "Not all who wander are lost." Natalie's car. I hadn't seen it in months. Not since the last family dinner she deigned to attend before disappearing again, to travel with some guy she'd met at a music festival. I parked in a visitor spot and trudged up the 3 flights of stairs to our apartment. My back ached, my head pounded, and all I wanted was a hot shower, a microwave dinner, and my bed. I had no idea that my entire life was about to change. I walked into my apartment after a long day at work, tired, hungry, and ready to crash. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag by the door, and turned the corner toward the kitchen. That's when I saw her. My sister Natalie laid out on my couch, feet up on the coffee table, a plate of food balanced on her stomach, remote in hand. She barely glanced at me before taking another bite of my leftovers and turning back to the TV. I stood there for a second, confused. She didn't live here. I turned toward the kitchen, and there was my mom casually stirring a pot on the stove like nothing was out of place. My dad was at the table drinking a beer. My stomach dropped. "What's going on?" I asked. My mom smiled like this was no big deal. "Oh, Natalie's going to be staying here for a while." "What?" I blinked. "Staying here?" "Yeah," my dad said, not even looking up. "She's had a tough time, lost her job, doesn't have anywhere to go, you know how it is." I turned back to Natalie, who was still lounging like she owned the place. She gave me a lazy nod. "Yeah, man, just till I get back on my feet." I stared. For context, Natalie is 32 years old. She has never held a job for more than 6 months. Every time she gets one, she complains that it's too stressful or too demanding, or that her boss has it out for her. She quits before she even gives herself a chance to get fired. And now, apparently, she was living here. I looked at my parents. "For how long?" Mom waved a hand like I was being ridiculous. "Oh, don't start. She just needs a little time. We all have to make sacrifices for family." Sacrifices. I took a deep breath. "When were you going to ask me about this?" My dad scoffed. "We don't need your permission. This isn't your place." That made me pause. The words hit like a physical blow. I'd been living here for 3 years. I painted the walls, hung the artwork, picked out the furniture. I'd made this space a home. And in one sentence, my dad had reminded me that none of it was really mine. Technically, they were right. The lease was in their name. It was an arrangement we'd made when I first graduated college. The apartment belonged to them on paper, but I paid for everything. They had offered to help me by putting the lease in their name since my credit was still new and rent in this city was astronomical for someone just starting out. What had started as a genuine attempt to help had slowly morphed into something else entirely, something that felt more like a trap. But I paid every single bill. The rent, the utilities, the groceries, the internet. I cleaned, I cooked, I maintained the apartment. They let me live here because it was convenient for them, and now they wanted to add a fully grown, jobless, useless woman-child into the mix, without even talking to me first. My blood was boiling, but I didn't say another word. I just nodded. A calm washed over me, the kind of calm that comes when you finally see something for what it really is. The fog had lifted. For years I'd been telling myself this was a fair arrangement, that my parents were helping me, that we were a family supporting each other. But in that moment, watching Natalie sprawled on my couch, eating my food, the truth crystallized with painful clarity. I wasn't their child, I was their ATM. I retreated to my bedroom, closed the door quietly behind me, and sat on the edge of my bed. The walls around me, walls I had painted myself on a long weekend when my parents were away, suddenly felt like they were closing in. Family photos smiled at me from the dresser. One in particular caught my eye. The three of us at my college graduation, my parents beaming with pride, arms around me as I held my diploma. Where had that pride gone? When had I transitioned from being their accomplished daughter to being their personal bank? I pulled out my laptop and opened a budgeting spreadsheet I had created years ago. I went through my expenses meticulously. Rent, $1,800. Utilities, around $300. Groceries, $500. And that was before Natalie started eating everything in sight. Internet, $80. My parents' cell phone plan that I'd somehow ended up paying for, $120. The list went on and on. I'd been spending nearly $3,000 a month to keep this place running. And that didn't include the loans my parents frequently asked for, money I knew would never be repaid. I did some quick calculations. If I lived alone in a smaller place, I could cut those expenses nearly in half. I could start building savings, maybe even take that trip to Japan I'd been dreaming about for years. I closed my laptop and made a decision. That was the moment I knew I was done. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I could hear Natalie's laughter through the wall as she watched TV well past midnight. The volume turned up too loud. I could hear my parents' hushed voices in their bedroom, probably discussing how they'd finally solved their Natalie problem. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, planning my escape. I didn't waste any time. First thing in the morning I started looking for my own apartment. I wasn't rich, but I made enough to afford something small. I found a one-bedroom across town, a little pricier, but worth every penny to have peace and privacy. I signed the lease the next day, and I didn't tell them. I started moving little by little, clothes first, then important documents, then small kitchen stuff. Every night after work, I'd take another load to my car and drive it over. Quiet, easy. The real challenge was the furniture. Getting a bed, couch and dining table out of an apartment without anyone noticing isn't exactly subtle. For 2 weeks, I bided my time, waiting for the perfect opportunity. I called moving companies for quotes, researched the best ways to transport furniture without damage, and even practiced taking apart my bed frame one night when everyone was asleep, just to see if I could do it quietly enough. My chance came sooner than expected. I overheard my mom on the phone with my aunt, planning a day trip to visit her. My aunt lived about an hour away, and these visits typically lasted all day. That same evening, I heard Natalie talking loudly on her phone about plans to crash at her friend Jamie's place to get away from all the family drama. The pieces were falling into place. But then I got lucky. One afternoon, both my parents left to visit my aunt, and Natalie had her lazy ass parked at a friend's house. The apartment was empty. It was now or never. I called the moving company I'd already put on standby. I need you here in an hour, I said. The dispatcher told me they couldn't guarantee such a quick arrival. I offered to pay double their usual rate. Suddenly, they could make it work. Next, I called my two closest friends, Mark and Jess. We'd been tight since college, and they were the only ones who truly understood my family situation. They'd listened to years of stories about my parents' manipulation and Natalie's entitlement. When I explained what I needed, they didn't hesitate. "We'll be there in 20, Mark said. I could hear him already grabbing his keys. Jess arrived first carrying coffee and donuts. "Fuel for the great escape," she said with a grim smile. Mark showed up minutes later with his toolbox and a determined look on his face. "Let's do this," he said. We worked with military precision. Mark dismantled furniture while Jess and I packed last-minute items and carried smaller pieces down to my car. When the moving truck arrived, the three of us formed a human chain, passing boxes and furniture pieces to the two movers who Tetrised everything into the truck with impressive efficiency. I called in a moving truck and a couple of buddies. In 4 hours we cleared out everything I owned: the bed, the couch, the TV, the dining table, everything that was mine. We took the artwork off the walls, leaving behind faded rectangles where frames had once hung. We emptied the kitchen of my expensive pots and pans, the good knife set I'd saved up for months to buy, the fancy coffee maker that had been a gift from my boss last Christmas. We cleared out the bathroom of my toiletries, the fluffy towels, even the shower curtain. As we worked, I couldn't help but think about what would remain. My parents and Natalie would return to find an apartment stripped of comfort and functionality. No dishes to eat from, no TV to watch, no comfortable furniture to lounge on. Just bare walls, empty cabinets, and hollow rooms. "Are you sure about this?" Jess asked as we carried out the last box. "It seems so final." "It is final," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. The movers finished loading the truck, and I handed them the address of my new place. They nodded and drove off, carrying my old life to my new beginning. Mark put his arm around my shoulders. "Want us to stay with you tonight?" "First night in a new place can be weird." I shook my head. "I need to do this part on my own, but thank you for everything." We hugged goodbye and they left, promising to check in tomorrow. I stood alone in what had been my home for 3 years, looking around at the bare walls, empty spaces. The apartment felt larger somehow, as if my belongings had taken up more space than I'd realized, or maybe it was my presence that had filled it, my energy, my care. I took one last walk through each room, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. In my old bedroom, I found a photo that had fallen behind the dresser, the same graduation picture I'd looked at the night I decided to leave. I picked it up, studied the smiling faces, then deliberately placed it on the bare mattress they'd left behind. Let it be a reminder of what they'd thrown away. By the time I locked the door and left, the apartment looked like a hollowed-out shell, and I was gone. The first night in my new apartment was strange, as Mark had predicted. Everything was mine, truly mine, but nothing felt quite right yet. Boxes were stacked in corners. Furniture was arranged temporarily, waiting to find its permanent place. I slept on a mattress on the floor because I hadn't had time to reassemble my bed frame. But despite the chaos, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. This space was mine. No one could take it from me. I spent the next day unpacking, arranging, creating a home that reflected only my tastes and needs. No compromises, no accommodating anyone else's preferences. It was liberating. I also took practical steps, changing my mailing address, updating my information with my bank and employer, activating utilities in my name. I was erasing all connections to my old life, one form at a time. 2 days later, the calls started. First, my mom. I let it go to voicemail. Then my dad, ignored. Then Natalie, yeah, right. The text started next. "Mom, where are you? The internet isn't working." "Dad, did you forget to pay the electricity bill?" "Mom, we need to talk. Call me now." I didn't answer. Then at exactly 8 p.m., my phone started blowing up. I picked up and the screaming began. "What the hell did you do?" I held the phone away from my ear. My mom was losing it. You took everything. The Wi-Fi is off, the electricity is off. Who's paying the bills? I leaned back on my own couch in my own apartment, took a deep breath and said, "Not my problem anymore." Silence. Then my dad's voice, angry, panicked. "You better get your ass back here and fix this." I smiled. "I don't live there anymore." More silence. Then my mom again. "How could you do this to your own family?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, you mean like how you brought in Natalie without asking me? Told me I had to make sacrifices for her? That's different," she snapped. "No," I said calmly. "It's not." She was breathing hard. "You're just going to leave us like this. We can't afford everything alone." I shrugged even though she couldn't see me. "Guess you'll have to make some sacrifices." Click. I hung up. The weight that lifted from my shoulders in that moment was almost physical. For years I'd been carrying the burden of their expectations, their dependence, their manipulation. I'd been living in a cage of obligation, believing that's what family meant. Endless sacrifice with no boundaries, no reciprocity, but I'd broken free. I'd reclaimed my life. I walked to the kitchen of my new apartment, my kitchen, and poured myself a glass of wine. The bottle was an expensive one I'd been saving for a special occasion. This certainly qualified. I took my glass to the small balcony, sat in the single chair I'd placed there, and looked out at the city lights. The night was cool and clear, stars faintly visible above the urban glow. Traffic hummed in the distance, and somewhere nearby, someone was playing soft jazz. This was mine, all mine. My phone kept vibrating with texts and calls, but I ignored it. I'd said what I needed to say. Eventually, I turned it off completely. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts from them to reel me back in. But tonight, I would savor my freedom. I finished my wine, took a long hot shower in my bathroom, and slid into my bed with fresh sheets that smelled like lavender. There were no sounds of Natalie's TV blaring through the wall, no muffled arguments between my parents, no footsteps in the hallway, no one eating my food in the kitchen, no one to please but myself. And for the first time in years, I slept like a baby. The day after I hung up on my mom, I expected more calls. They didn't stop. First angry texts, then guilt-tripping ones. Then my mom switched to begging. "Mom, please come back. We can work this out. Dad, you're being selfish. Don't turn your back on your family. Mom, we can't do this without you." I didn't respond. Then Natalie texted. "Natalie, wow dude, real mature. You left us high and dry." Us? Oh, I left her high and dry. The woman who hadn't held a job in years. The same woman who moved into my place and took over my couch without asking. I ignored her too. Her texts grew increasingly desperate, alternating between guilt trips. "How could you do this to your own sister?" Anger. "You're being so childish and petty," and pathetic attempts at reconciliation. "I'm sorry if you feel hurt, but you could have talked to me." That last one almost made me respond. Almost. The classic non-apology, the shifting of blame back onto me. I'd heard it so many times before. "I'm sorry if you feel hurt," rather than "I'm sorry I hurt you." It was manipulation 101, and I was no longer playing that game. Instead, I focused on building my new life. I hung artwork on the walls. I bought plants, actual living things I would care for. Something I'd never been able to have before because Natalie would either kill them through neglect when it was her turn to water them, or knock them over during one of her dramatic episodes. I established a morning routine that didn't involve tiptoeing around other people's moods. I came home from work and could count on everything being exactly as I'd left it. At work, I felt a change too. The constant background stress of home had been affecting me more than I'd realized. Now I was more focused, more creative, more present. My boss noticed. "Whatever you're doing differently, keep it up," she said after I presented a new campaign that won us a major client. "You're on fire lately." I made new friends in my apartment building. A retired teacher who lived across the hall and gave me cuttings from her thriving herb garden. A young couple on the first floor who invited me to their weekly game nights. The maintenance man who appreciated that I actually reported issues promptly instead of letting them worsen. Small connections but meaningful ones based on mutual respect rather than obligation. A week passed, Then too, I checked in occasionally with my aunt, who kept me updated on the situation without judgment. According to her, chaos reigned at the apartment. The internet stayed off. Apparently, none of them knew how to set up a new account or even pay the existing one. The lights flickered once, but I guess they managed to scrape together enough to pay the electric bill. Barely. Then my aunt, the only family member I still talk to, called. "You are not going to believe what your parents just asked me," she said, already laughing. I leaned back on my couch. "Oh, I have a few guesses. They want me to lend them money," she said, "for rent." I smirked. "Let me guess, because I abandoned them." Bingo. I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. I told them no, I'm not funding their poor decisions. Good. At least someone in the family had sense. Then she hesitated. "But there's something else." I sat up. "What?" She sighed. "Your dad's been talking about getting a second job." I blinked. My dad, the man who always bragged about how he worked hard his whole life. The same man who told me to suck it up every time I struggled to make ends meet. He was struggling. I should have felt bad. I didn't. "Guess he'll just have to make sacrifices," I said, repeating his own words back. My aunt chuckled. "Thought you'd like that." But then she dropped a bombshell. "And Natalie," she said, "your parents are getting sick of her." Apparently, the first week after I left, my parents were still treating Natalie like their precious little guest. But then reality hit. The apartment was a mess. The fridge was empty because I wasn't buying groceries anymore. The laundry piled up because I wasn't doing it. The bills were impossible to keep up with because I wasn't covering them. And Natalie, my aunt, didn't hold back the details. "Your sister," she said with undisguised disgust, "is something else." Apparently Natalie had taken over my bedroom, the largest in the apartment, without discussion. She'd complained about having to sleep on the couch, my couch, which I'd taken with me, so my parents had given her my room. She'd thrown out the remaining furniture, a simple desk and bookshelf I'd left behind because they weren't worth the hassle, claiming they didn't match her aesthetic. She didn't lift a damn finger around the place. The dishes piled up in the sink until my mother, exhausted after her shift at the department store, would finally cave and wash them. Laundry overflowed from the hamper, most of it Natalie's. My dad had to clear a path through discarded clothes and food wrappers just to get to the bathroom in the morning. She sat around all day watching shows on her laptop since the TV was gone, eating whatever food was left and pretending nothing was wrong. She'd go out with friends who somehow always disappeared when she needed a place to crash or money for rent, and come home at all hours, waking my parents, who had to be up early for work. The apartment had become a disaster zone. My mother, who had always been house-proud, was embarrassed to have anyone over. My father, whose usual response to household problems was to retreat to his recliner and pretend they didn't exist, couldn't escape the chaos because I'd taken his recliner with me. My aunt described it as karma in real time. Then, as finances grew tighter and my parents realized they couldn't sustain this arrangement, my mom asked Natalie to help with money. Not even a lot, just a contribution toward groceries and utilities. She told her, "It's time you started pulling your weight around here." And Natalie, the fully grown woman child, said, "That's not fair. I didn't ask to be put in this situation." My aunt nearly wheezed laughing when she told me this part of the story. She'd been visiting that day, dropping off some groceries because she knew my parents were struggling. She witnessed the entire exchange from her seat at what remained of the kitchen table. "Your mom lost it," my aunt said, her voice still holding a note of surprise. "I've never seen her like that before." Her face went completely red, and for a second I thought she might actually throw something. According to my aunt, my mother stood in the middle of the kitchen, hands trembling with anger, and finally said what she should have said years ago. "You're a grown woman, Natalie. Get a job." I was grinning as I listened to this over the phone, curled up on my couch with a mug of tea. Part of me wished I could have seen it. The moment when my mother finally confronted the truth about her precious, pampered daughter. The moment when the golden child's shine finally dulled. And what did Natalie say to that? "Oh, it was classic Natalie," my aunt replied with a snort. She rolled her eyes, heaved this dramatic sigh like she was the one being persecuted, and said, "I'll start looking soon." Then she had the nerve to ask your mom for money to get her nails done because, and I quote, "I can't go to interviews looking unprofessional." We both knew what that meant. Natalie wasn't looking for a job. Natalie wasn't doing anything other than continuing the same patterns she'd maintained her entire adult life. The only difference was that I wasn't there to pick up the slack anymore, and now my parents were finally realizing what I had known for years. Natalie was a parasite. One night, after almost a month of silence, I got a voicemail from my mom. I pressed play. Her voice was tired. Not angry, not screaming, just tired. "Sweetheart," she started. "We need to talk." I raised an eyebrow. "We know things got out of hand," she continued. "But maybe we can find a way to work this out." A pause. Then the kicker. "If you just move back in, things will go back to normal. We'll tell Natalie she has to leave." There it was. The exact thing I had been waiting for. They weren't asking me to come home because they missed me. They were asking because they needed me, because I was the only one who kept things together. And only now, after they had gone through weeks of stress, struggle, and financial panic, did they finally realize my worth. I sat there staring at my phone, and I smiled because I wasn't done yet. Not even close. I sat there staring at my phone, replaying my mom's voicemail. "If you just move back in, things will go back to normal. We'll tell Natalie she has to leave." They were finally desperate. I should have felt victorious, but instead, I felt something else. Suspicion. See, my parents had never taken my side over Natalie, not once, and now, suddenly, they were willing to kick her out. Just like that, something didn't add up. So, instead of ignoring them, I decided to play along. I called my mom back. "Hey," I said casually. "Got your message." Her voice immediately perked up. "Oh, sweetheart, I knew you'd call." I said. "Just to be clear, you're saying that if I move back in, Natalie has to leave." A pause. Too long of a pause. Then she sighed. "Well, we're still talking to her about it." I almost laughed. There it was. They weren't planning to kick her out at all. They just wanted me back to keep paying for everything. And I was about to call her out on it when she said something that changed everything. "It's just..." She hesitated. "Natalie already signed a job contract. She's going to start work next week." "What?" I blinked. "She what? She got a job?" she said, excited now. "Isn't that wonderful?" I sat there stunned. Natalie working. Something wasn't right. I hung up and immediately called my aunt. "Natalie got a job?" I said flatly. She burst out laughing. "Please," she said. "Your sister wouldn't work a real job if her life depended on it." "Yeah, well, Mom says she signed a contract." My aunt stopped laughing. "What kind of contract?" she asked slowly. I frowned. "I don't know. She didn't say." "Find out," my aunt said, suddenly serious. "Something's off." And she was right. I texted my mom. "Me. What job did Natalie get?" "Mom, oh, something in finance." She said it's remote work. Remote work, that set off alarm bells. I went straight to Google and looked up common job scams. And there it was. Fake remote finance jobs. A classic scam. The company sends a fake check, tells you to deposit it and send back a portion for office supplies, and then the check bounces, leaving you thousands in debt. My stomach dropped. Natalie had no clue what she just walked into. I could have told my mom right then. I could have warned them. But then I thought about all the crap they put me through. How they took my money, took my space, took me for granted. And now, for the first time ever, Natalie was about to feel the consequences of her own laziness. So instead of warning them, I waited. And 2 weeks later, the call came. It was my mom sobbing. "She's been scammed," she wailed. "Natalie's bank account is negative. They took everything." I stayed silent. "We don't know what to do," she cried. "She owes over $3,000. I leaned back, calm as ever. "Damn, that's rough." My dad grabbed the phone. "We need your help." I almost choked, laughing. "My help? You've got savings," he said quickly. Just lend us some money to get Natalie back on her feet just until we figure this out. I almost admired the audacity. They had spent years using me, had replaced me with Natalie without hesitation, had let me struggle, never once offering to help. And now they wanted my money. I took a deep breath, and then I said the most satisfying words of my life. You'll just have to make some sacrifices for family. Click. I hung up. Days passed. Then another week. I ignored every text, every call. Then one day my aunt called me sounding giddy. You are not going to believe this. I raised an eyebrow. Try me. Natalie's moving out. I froze. Wait, what? Yep, she said, practically giggling. Your parents finally snapped. They told her if she's not contributing, she has to go. Oh, this was too good. Natalie, actually leaving? I said, still processing it. Yup. And you know what she said? I grinned. Something stupid, I'm guessing. She said, this is so unfair. I'm your daughter, I lost it. Because for years they treated Natalie like their golden child, let her get away with everything. And now when the money was gone, when the free ride was over, she finally learned what it felt like to be discarded. And I was thriving. I had my own place, my own peace, my own life, and I hadn't sacrificed a damn thing. A few days after my aunt told me the news, I got a text from Natalie. Natalie, wow. So you're really not going to help me? I stared at my phone. Then another text popped up. Natalie, you're such a selfish piece of... I smirked. Didn't you say it was immature when I moved out? Funny how that works. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. After Natalie got kicked out, I thought my parents would finally leave me alone. Nope. A week later, they showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and there they were. My mom looking all sad and pitiful. My dad with his arms crossed like he was still in charge of something. I didn't say a word, just stared at them. My mom sighed. Can we come in? No. She blinked. My dad's jaw tightened. We just want to talk. I can hear you fine from here, I said. My mom looked like she wanted to cry. Sweetheart, please. We know we made mistakes. I cut her off. What do you want? She looked down. We were struggling. I said nothing. She sniffled. Money is tight. Your father had to pick up extra shifts. And now with Natalie gone, the rent is... I laughed loudly right in their faces because there it was. They didn't come to apologize. They didn't come because they missed me. They came because they needed money. Again. I crossed my arms. So, let me get this straight. You let Natalie move in. You told me to make sacrifices. You took my money, my space, everything. And now that I'm gone, now that Natalie is gone, you're struggling. My dad looked pissed. You don't have to rub it in. Oh, I absolutely do, I said. My mom wiped her eyes. Please, honey. We're family, we can fix this. I took a deep breath, looked her right in the eyes, and then I said, sell the car. She blinked. What? I pointed to their shiny brand new SUV, the one they bought right before Natalie moved in, the one they didn't need but just had to have. Sell it, I said again. Use the money to pay rent. My dad's face turned red. That's our car, we're not selling it. I shrugged. Then get a smaller apartment. We like this place, my mom said weakly. I smirked. Well, I like not being used as a human ATM, but here we are. Silence. Then my dad snapped. Fine. If you want to act like this, if you want to turn your back on us, then don't come back ever. I smiled gladly, and I shut the door in their faces. Over the next few months, I heard everything through my aunt. They never sold the car. They never moved to a smaller place. They tried borrowing from other family members, but everyone knew how they treated me. No one helped them. And then they got evicted. Turns out when you rely on someone else to pay your bills for years, it's hard to suddenly manage it on your own. They had to move into a tiny one-bedroom rental in a bad part of town. And guess who refused to take them in? Natalie. After years of them bending over backwards for her, Natalie told them, I can't take care of you guys, I got to focus on myself. The ultimate irony, the perfect punchline to this years-long joke. The person they'd sacrificed everything for, including their relationship with me, wouldn't even consider returning the favor. I found out through my aunt, who'd been there once again, witnessing another family meltdown. She called me immediately afterward, her voice a mixture of disbelief and vindication. "You won't believe what just happened," she said. "Your parents actually asked Natalie if they could stay with her. They're being evicted at the end of the month, and they asked if they could crash at her boyfriend's place until they find something else." I held my breath, waiting for the rest. Natalie just stared at them like they'd grown second heads. My aunt continued. Then she said, and I'm quoting exactly here, "Are you kidding me? Derek's place barely has room for the two of us. And besides, I can't take care of you guys. I got to focus on myself right now." Then she grabbed her purse and left, just walked out while your mom was in tears. I felt a twinge of something. Not quite sympathy, but recognition perhaps. The pain of being discarded by someone whose opinion you valued, whose love you thought was unconditional. My parents were experiencing what they'd put me through. But then I remembered all the years of emotional manipulation, of financial exploitation, of being treated as less valuable than my sister. I remembered how easily they'd replaced me, how quickly they'd expected me to accept an intolerable situation just because it was convenient for them. And I laughed so hard I cried, tears streaming down my face as I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the life I built for myself despite them, not because of them. They deserved every bit of it. As for me, I was thriving. My apartment was mine. My bills were mine. My life was finally my own, and for the first time in years I didn't have to sacrifice anything for people who wouldn't do the same for me.